Welcome to the final experiments. The final experiments are a preponderance of evidence against flat Earth. And the final experiments all confirm the globe. These experiments were all conducted in December of 2024 when 4 flat earthers and 4 globers went on a journey to Antarctica with me, Will Duffy. We spent time in Punta Arenas, Chile, which is at the southern tip of South America, before flying to Antarctica. This entire trip allowed us to conduct historic experiments and collect data firsthand from an area of the world that few people will ever have the opportunity to visit and do this themselves. Prior to my announcement of the final experiment in early 2024, a vast majority of flat earthers, with very few exceptions, promoted the Gleason's map of the world, which is an azimuthal equidistant projection. This map had the North Pole at the center and pushed the south to the outer perimeter of the known world. This made Antarctica an ice wall perimeter around all the world's continents, which served to hold in all the world's oceans, as flat earthers claim water must have a container. It also extends the entire southern hemisphere into a larger and larger area where on the globe, everything south of the equator gets closer and closer together. This made being at the southern tip of South America and in Antarctica the perfect place to test flat Earth claims and also confirm the globe predictions. Every single flat Earth claim failed. Every flat Earth prediction was demonstrably false. The final experiments are meant to be taken collectively, just like evidence in a court of law. Undoubtedly, flat earthers will attempt to discredit individual experiments we did, while at the same time ignoring the rest. If they cannot provide an accurate map of the world and a working model that can account for the results of all of these final experiments collectively, that is because we do not live on a flat Earth. If they try to say these experiments are not actual experiments, but only observations, that is because they cannot reconcile our findings with a flat Earth. If they say that flat Earth does not make predictions, that is because making accurate and testable predictions based on a flat Earth is impossible, because a flat Earth does not exist. You cannot make and test predictions based on something that is not real. Maps of the globe exist because the globe exists. The entire globe model exists because the globe exists. Countless globe predictions come true every single day, and countless future globe predictions will continue to happen exactly as predicted because the globe exists. If a flat earther tells you that there is no accurate flat Earth map and there is no working flat Earth model and that they don't make predictions, that is an implicit admission that a flat Earth does not exist. Because you can map things that exist, you can model things that exist, and you can make very specific predictions that come true based on something that actually exists and is testable. I created the final experiment to give both sides, flat Earth and globe, an equal opportunity to prove their side. Only the globe side returned with evidence supporting their position. The globe side returned with tons of concrete evidence that both accurately matches the globe model and also falsifies flat Earth. This brings us to equatorial mounts. Often referred to as an EQ mount for short, equatorial mounts prove the globe and falsify flat Earth. In case that was missed, EQ mounts prove the globe and subsequently falsify flat Earth. If you do not know what an equatorial mount is, this video will explain what they are and how they work. And more importantly, once you understand how they work, it will be clear that they would only work on a rotating sphere and could never work on a stationary flat Earth. Dave McKeegan, who went with us to Antarctica and was on the globe side, brought his EQ mount all the way from England to Union Glacier Camp for TFE. And what's really fascinating is that after he first set it up at Halfway Point, where we all had our cameras set up to film the 24-hour sun, his EQ mount was not properly tracking the sun. And when you learn why, you will see that EQ mounts not only prove the globe, but they confirm heliocentrism as well. It's completely game over for flat Earth. An equatorial mount is a motorized mount designed for telescopes and cameras specifically to offset Earth's rotation so the camera or telescope stays fixed on a celestial object such as the sun, the moon, or a specific star. An EQ mount achieves this by having its rotational axis parallel to the Earth's axis. This is what's known as polar alignment. And polar alignment on an EQ mount is set up by orienting the mount's polar axis, normally called the right ascension axis, to the same angle as the latitude where the mount is located. And as this angle changes from 90 degrees at the poles to 0 degrees at the equator, you will notice that the axis remains parallel to the Earth's axis of rotation and therefore pointed in the same direction. This only works on a sphere and is the first major problem for flat Earth. But before we dive deeper into that, there's an even bigger issue. And that is, I cannot find a single flat earther who understands how an equatorial mount works. This is not an exaggeration. Of the very few flat earthers I could find who even talk about EQ mounts, not one of them has even the slightest clue how they work. What you are about to hear is really bad. But I should also point out that it was difficult to even find flat earthers in the first place discussing EQ mounts. I can't find a single example of Eric Dubé ever dealing with equatorial mounts. Same for Mark Sargent and Nathan Oakley and Flatzoid. And until a recent video, which I will cover later in this video, Flat Earth Dave never discussed EQ mounts either. So the flat Earth community needs to understand that as a whole, they are clearly and obviously avoiding the topic of equatorial mounts. And more significantly, the flat Earth community does not have a single person that can accurately explain how an EQ mount works. Not one. And considering people own them and use them all over the world, this is not a situation where the truth is being suppressed or access is being denied. This is simply a situation where ignorance, at this point willful ignorance, is the only reason I cannot find even one flat earther who knows how an EQ mount works. Now, at least one flat earther that I know of owns an equatorial mount, and I had the opportunity to ask him live how it works. Here was his response.
This is a Celestron AVX equatorial mount, and I believe personally that equatorial mounts and scopes evidence our enclosed realm, and I think they evidence it very well.
What is your understanding as to how an equatorial mount works?
Are we going to talk? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude here. Are we going to talk about that, or are we going to talk about the final experience?
My question was shut down almost instantly. And I think it's clear why. EQ mounts prove the globe and would never work on a flat Earth. I found another clip of two flat earthers attempting to explain how an EQ mount works on a flat Earth. Their names are Peter and Pete.
Then we replied because he placed the camera on an equatorial mount to take his time-lapse photos, silly. He didn't fix his camera to a tripod, did he, Dumbo? Absolutely, Max 5250 Dumbo. No Sherlock. Now all you have to do is to explain how equatorial mount works on a flat motionless surface. Well, it's quite easy. Well, there you go. They just do. You know, it's so easy.
Tell me you have no idea how an EQ mount works without telling me you have no idea how an EQ mount works. Up next is Flat Earth YouTube channel Just Plain Science. If you think things can't get worse, hear what this flat earther claims in his video titled Equatorial Mounts Prove It's Motionless and Flat.
The equatorial mount only works on a ball. Excuse me, the equatorial mount was invented in like 17 or 1800, when everyone thought the earth was flat. Wouldn't it be kind of stupid to make an invention for something that didn't exist yet, called globe earth?
I literally have no words. According to this flat earther, in the year 17 or 1800, the globe had not yet been invented and everyone thought the earth was flat. Again, no words. Let's continue.
All right. Why does an equatorial mount disprove flat earth? An equatorial mount is a telescope mount, where axis is aligned parallel to the axis of the rotation of the earth. Really? Do you think the telescope knows the earth is rotating? Do you think that you're putting in the calculations in the miles per hour of the rotation of the earth into your little telescope there to make it so you can look at the stars and not have to monkey with the telescope every time the stars move? Do you think you're putting in the calculations for the rotation of the earth, people?
Yes, that's exactly what an EQ mount does. As I said, flat earthers are absolutely clueless as to how equatorial mounts work, and he's not done.
A flat earth with stars' rotations concentric about the northern celestial pole will require always correction around two axes to track the star. The polar axis of an equatorial mount will always be not aligned with the celestial rotation of the flat earth. Blah, 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 blah. Therefore, the fact that an equatorial mount works perfectly is in no way compatible with the flat earth. Blah, 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 blah. Science and stuff. Hey, you're setting up your telescope on a flat plane. Okay?
He reminds me of Nathan Oakley, who ignores any and all arguments and just claims Earth is measured flat, even though he's never measured the Earth himself. It's a good thing we measured the Earth as part of TFE, and the Earth measures curved. Now, Just Plain Science doesn't seem to like anything that he calls science and stuff, and says the telescope is set up on a flat plane. No, it's set up level. There's a difference. There is not a single flat plane anywhere on the natural Earth. And he's still not done.
Now, I want you to take a look here. We'll look back at this. Okay? This is so you can track the movement of the stars in the sky. This is not to counteract the rotation of the Earth.
I tried to warn you how bad this was. I guess ignorance must be bliss. If you are a flat earther and you think an EQ mount is not designed to counteract the rotation of the Earth, you would be completely wrong. That's exactly what an equatorial mount does and what it was invented for. This flat earther says one more thing that you have to hear for yourself to believe.
Anyways, there you have it. Equatorial mount shenanigans, garbage, crap. Oh, the equatorial mount, it proves the globe model. No, it doesn't. It proves the flat Earth. All right? Back when this thing was invented in the 1700s or whatever, this is just a variation on the stuff that people use out in the boats at sea. Okay?
No, they did not use EQ mounts in boats at sea. You would never use an EQ mount in a boat, and if you actually understood equatorial mounts at all, you would never even consider such a thing. Now, another flat earther named Joe Hill, who I've actually met in person, and he's a really nice guy, he made an attempt at reconciling the EQ mount with a flat earth and failed miserably.
I can give an example in this rhetoric situation. First, he shows us Astronomy Live's telescope on an equatorial mount with one axis, tracking the stars in the sky with a motor. So I'll bet you if I went up and kicked that telescope, Reds would be like, "What are you doing? Don't move the telescope. It can't be moved." Like, if you touched the telescope, it would ruin the whole picture. The telescope's not moving, Reds. Why would you argue that the telescope's moving? Because you pretend you're living in the sky? I don't get it. This is what I said in the debate. I don't understand. We live on Earth, and one of the most obvious things about where we live is that it's a solid ground and it never moves. It's completely stationary. And so that's the obvious thing. So then Red thinks he can prove that it's moving, but to set it in one spot and think that you're measuring the ground moving is just an idea you have, because it's not moving. Hasn't moved. But yeah, reverse engineering. So he shows us a moving telescope to track the moving sky, and then he wants to say in the same sentence that it's not the sky moving, it's the Earth turning.
Joe clearly does not understand EQ mounts. Of course you would never want to kick a telescope on an EQ mount while it's tracking a celestial object. And if you thought the claim that EQ mounts were used on boats at sea was bad, listen to what Joe says next.
And they'll want to say, that doesn't work on a flat Earth model. Well, it does work on the flat Earth model. It's just that there's no flat Earth model. There's no globe Earth model either, as I also explained in this video. So let's go down to the equator. Okay, now we're at the equator, and you got to turn your telescope around. If I was a person on a globe and I thought the flat Earth was so ridiculous, I'd go derp, derp, derp. Because this is ridiculous, simple stuff, guys. You don't have to have a curved surface to look at the stars in the sky. You don't have to have a flat surface to look at the stars. You can look at them from a jet. You could set an equatorial mount up on the wing of a jet and fly it wherever you want. And as long as that, the base of it, that equatorial mount is pointed at the center of rotation of something that you want to follow, it's called a circle.
No, Joe. EQ mounts would never work on the wing of a flying jet. Now, Joe referenced his debate with Red's rhetoric. In that debate, Reds brought up EQ mounts, and after the debate was over, Joe made a video in an attempt to debunk Reds. The video is titled, "Equatorial Mounts Work on Flat Earth, Debunking Reds' Rhetoric." You don't have to listen very long to find out that Joe definitely still does not understand equatorial mounts, which means no debunking of Red's rhetoric.
And here are star trails taken from Minnesota by me. It works this way, anywhere you can see Polaris from. So you only need one axis. Reds was showing some footage of Astronomy Live's telescope on an equatorial mount following the stars to do a long exposure image. And it was only on one axis. Well, that's exactly what I do here in Minnesota.
Once again, I'm at a complete loss for words. This could not be more wrong. Joe thinks that the single axis of rotation on an EQ mount is used to video star trails. Again, tell me you don't understand EQ mounts without telling me you don't understand EQ mounts. And leaving no room for doubt that Joe does not understand equatorial mounts at all, he then says this.
Red says that the Earth is rotating and the sky is stationary. Then he says that the rotation of the sky proves something about the shape of the Earth, because a kind of telescope mount I use all the time won't be able to work on a flat Earth to track the stars. Then he shows a video from Astronomy Live of a scope on an equatorial mount with one axis tracking the motion of the stars. I do it all the time, and it's my favorite type of mount to track stars with. Only one axis of rotation. One motor. Which again, why does Reds think I would need a motor on my telescope if the sky is stationary?
Joe thinks if the sky is stationary and the Earth is spinning, then you would not need a motor at all on your EQ mount. What flat earthers do not comprehend for some reason is that the purpose of the motorized axis on an equatorial mount is specifically to counteract Earth's rotation. Now, in his debate with Red's rhetoric, Joe makes an admission which is critical in the flat versus globe debate.
No, it's everybody's word for it. Everybody knows that stars move. The constellations move in the night sky. Everybody knows that.
Or
So it's not my
Earth could
word.
be
It's
rotating.
something that we observe.
Or the
Everybody
Earth could be
observes it.
rotating.
What's that?
Or the Earth could be rotating.
No, I agree. It could be. It could be rotating, or it could be the sky rotating.
I need to give Joe credit here for admitting that what we observe with the celestial bodies in the sky does not necessitate that these celestial objects are moving, and it could very well be the case that the Earth is rotating instead. Joe is correct. But then he makes an error that almost every single flat earther makes when talking about the lights in the sky.
I'm not saying that you're wrong or something. I'm saying that you are able to ignore your own flawed perceptions in order to. So
Because I
that's
have
what
more
that's all
accurate equipment I can rely on.
And
Absolutely.
that's actually exactly what I'm pointing out, is that you're relying on the equipment rather than your actual senses.
Joe here says Reds is relying on his equipment rather than his actual senses. Flat earthers say this all the time. They claim that our senses tell us that the lights in the sky are moving and therefore it's not the Earth spinning. But their senses do not tell them that the lights in the sky are moving. No one looks at the sun during the day and sees it moving. No one looks at the moon and stars at night and sees them moving. When a flat earther like Joe uses time-lapse photography to capture star trails, he is doing what he just accused Reds of doing and relying on equipment rather than his actual senses. The naked eye without any equipment will perceive no movement whatsoever in the celestial bodies. Rather, we only perceive that they are in different locations as time elapses. And when something has moved locations from where you last observed it, that means one of two things. Either the object has moved, or you have, or both. And you must then attempt to determine which one actually happened. So both sides rely on equipment and not their senses when it comes to the lights in the sky. And as Joe admitted, the hypothesis that the Earth is rotating, causing the lights in the sky to change where we observe them, is just as valid as the hypothesis that the lights are actually the ones moving. So this brings us back to equipment. Which hypothesis does the equipment tell us is the case? Was the EQ mount designed for a globe or a flat Earth? Here is Flat Earth channel Iron Horse admitting the truth about how equatorial mounts are designed.
And when it comes to your equatorial mount designed to only work on your model of a spinning ball, why would we want to spend all our time wasting it answering nonsensical questions? You know, if I built something that only worked on the flat Earth, and then I asked you to explain me, how does this work on the ball Earth? Well, then I'd be equally ignorant and arrogant as well, because certain things only work according to certain models. And if you're going to back engineer it according to the model, it doesn't matter how right or wrong the model is, if you make it to work to that model, it's not going to work on the other, and vice versa. So,
according to Iron Horse, the EQ mount was designed to work on a spinning ball. And he's correct. So the obvious question is, if they are designed to work on a rotating globe, and they work flawlessly on Earth, doesn't that mean we live on a rotating globe? Well, this flat earther gets everything else wrong about equatorial mounts and then makes an insane accusation.
and the thing about this Wolfie's video, why he's so dishonest, is he says that he's set his telescope to track the sun. But earlier on in his video, what has he said? He says he's using it to track any object in the sky. And yet they don't use an equatorial mount to track any object in the sky at all. They use it to track the sun, the one thing that's near and close to us and goes around in a really big circle.
It's hard to believe that these statements are being made, as they could not be more incorrect. EQ mounts are not just to track the sun. You can track any celestial object in the sky with an equatorial mount. The sun, the moon, the stars, even the planets. And this was not an inadvertent slip-up, as Iron Horse repeats this claim again, that EQ mounts can only track the sun.
I don't know exactly how they're even trying to say this equatorial mount works for anything apart from tracking the sun. So let's at least be honest about that and not say we're using it to track any object in the sky.
It's clear he has no clue how equatorial mounts work, and so he decides to do what flat earthers do so often, which is call people liars without any evidence whatsoever.
Let's then assume we are looking at on the flat earth model. Well, of course you can't track something with a single axis of rotation when you're seeing it do this bit from our perspective, but it's actually coming near and far. It appears to maybe move in a straight line. I don't know, because you didn't even show whether it was moving in a straight line or not to track the sun. My theory is it's actually gone in a big curve, and because you can't track it with your equatorial mount, that's why you had to fake it and pretend that that it took one axis of rotation, because I think you're full of shit. I really do.
Now, I'm sure flat earthers are going to accuse me of cherry picking flat earthers who are not as well known as others who are more seasoned in flat earth. And again, go try and find a single example of Eric Dubé discussing equatorial mounts. Try and find an example of Flat Earth Banjo mentioning EQ mounts. Mark Sargent, Flatzoid, Nathan Oakley. You won't find anything. Years and years in Flat Earth, and they've never mentioned EQ mounts even once. There is a reason for this. They cannot refute them. Now, I was able to find single examples from Stephen Alonso, Austin Whitsitt, and Flat Earth Dave. Stephen Alonso has a single video on the topic that is just 61 seconds long, titled How to Use an EQ Mount on Flat Earth. And you'll notice in this video, he puts a sphere, a literal sphere, above the observer to show how an EQ mount works. This is an admission that an EQ mount only works with a sphere. Now, as to why the lights in the sky move exactly how we would expect them to move on a sphere, he doesn't say, but we all know why. As flat earther Karen B confessed,
every single sky observation matches the globe. Every single one that I made matches the globe from 10 years ago. So I stopped doing that.
Yes, all sky observations match the globe, and that's because we live on a globe. Up next is Austin Whitsitt. While I could not find any examples of Austin dealing with equatorial mounts on his Whitsitt Gets It channel, I was able to find one on Modern Day Debate. Here it is.
Hang024, thanks for your super chat. Question for the Whitsitt Gets It. Please explain how an equatorial mount works on flat Earth.
Better than on a globe Earth.
Gotcha.
I sincerely hope no one thinks That was a good or valid answer. When you are asked to explain how an EQ mount works, saying they work better on a flat earth than on a globe earth is not an answer and exposes that you do not know how they work. Now, a TFE video would not be complete without Flat Earth Dave. Until a very recent video from about a month ago, Flat Earth Dave also avoided talking about equatorial mounts and would refuse to discuss them when asked about them.
Well, right, yeah, at the equator, if you say theoretically zero, it would. It's basically on the horizon, and you don't even have to have an equatorial mount because your mount can actually just be.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that.
Use an alt-as mount.
Right. Forget the mount.
Yes, forget the mount. Let's not talk about the EQ mount. Now, about a month ago, Flat Earth Dave released this video on his DITRH YouTube channel titled Sundials and Equatorial Telescopes Don't Prove Flat Earth. Interesting title, which I agree with. EQ telescopes don't prove flat Earth, that's for sure. And in this video, Dave Weiss plays the audio of a conversation he had with ChatGPT about EQ mounts. Here was his first question to ChatGPT.
So now let's talk about equatorial mount telescopes. How do they work?
Sure. An equatorial mount telescope is designed to track the motion of stars as the Earth rotates. It has one axis aligned parallel to Earth's axis of rotation. This axis is called the right ascension axis. When the telescope is properly aligned, you can move it along this axis to follow a star's path across the sky. This means the telescope only needs to rotate in one direction to keep an object in view, making it easier to track celestial objects over time. In short, an equatorial mount compensates for Earth's rotation, allowing the telescope to stay fixed on a star or planet with minimal adjustments.
Now, this answer is correct, but more importantly, when I play Flat Earth Dave's own audio into my ChatGPT, I get the same response. But that's not the case for his follow-up questions. After getting a correct response from ChatGPT that I can confirm when playing his audio into my ChatGPT, he then asks ChatGPT to agree that an equatorial mount telescope would work exactly the same on a flat Earth and a globe. This is patently false, and you would expect ChatGPT to know this, but in his video, he plays audio from ChatGPT agreeing with him on this point. There's just one problem. This simply isn't true. So I decided to play the audio of Dave's own question from his video into my ChatGPT, and I got a completely different response.
Flat Earth model, we have Polaris as a center point. All of the luminaries, sun, moon, and stars all circle around Polaris. So with a local sun in a flat Earth model, circling around Polaris, an equatorial mount telescope would work exactly the same. Is that correct?
In an equatorial mount, the alignment is based on the actual rotational axis of the Earth. This allows the mount to track celestial objects as they appear to move across the sky due to Earth's rotation. In a flat Earth model, the concept of a central Polaris and a local sun circling around it is not consistent with how celestial mechanics and observational astronomy work in our understanding of the universe. In reality, the equatorial mount's design is based on the rotation of a spherical Earth, not on a flat Earth model. So, while the mount might appear to function similarly in a hypothetical flat Earth scenario, the underlying principles and the scientific basis would not align with the flat Earth model.
Now that is the correct answer, and completely opposite of what we hear in Dave's video. And then the same thing happens with his next question. He then asks ChatGPT to agree that if you did not know if the Earth was flat or a globe, you could not determine which one it was by using an equatorial mount telescope, and ChatGPT again agrees. But this is also factually inaccurate, and again, not the answer I get when playing his own audio into my ChatGPT.
So you didn't know if the Earth was a flat model, was a flat Earth with a small local sun orbiting Polaris, or the Earth was a heliocentric globe, as mainstream science claims, and you were using an equatorial mount telescope, you wouldn't be able to determine which one it was by how the telescope worked, because they both are not mutually exclusive. Is that correct?
The equatorial mount is designed to track celestial objects based on the rotation of the Earth. Its functionality is rooted in the principles of a rotating spherical Earth. If we were considering a flat Earth model with a small local sun, the way objects move in the sky would be fundamentally different. However, regardless of the model, the mount's operation is based on the concept of compensating for the Earth's rotation. So, within the framework of how the equatorial mount is designed to track objects, it aligns with our understanding of a spherical Earth. So, in practical terms, the equatorial mount is built on the principles that align with the spherical Earth model and not a flat Earth model.
As you just heard, ChatGPT clearly understands EQ mounts and, more importantly, understands that they would only work on a rotating globe and would never work on a flat Earth. So what is going on here? Well, I asked ChatGPT why it gave Flat Earth Dave a different answer than it did for me when the question was identical. And the response I got was stunning. ChatGPT said, "You're absolutely right to be puzzled. It seems like ChatGPT gave two conflicting answers to the exact same question, and in a case where only one answer is scientifically correct. Let's break down why this could have happened and what likely went wrong. First, you're correct. They do not work the same. An equatorial mount only works as designed on a rotating globe because it relies on Earth's rotation around its axis. And it requires polar alignment based on the observer's latitude. On a flat, non-rotating Earth, there is no consistent celestial axis to align to, and celestial motion would not be predictable in the same way. So any answer suggesting they would work the same is objectively wrong. Now, this is correct. An EQ mount would never work on a flat Earth. So why did this happen? ChatGPT told me, and it's not good for flat Earth. ChatGPT is sometimes too accommodating or neutral. When someone asks a question with embedded assumptions, for example, would an EQ mount work the same on flat Earth and globe Earth, ChatGPT may try to give a non-confrontational answer or lean into the phrasing rather than challenging flawed assumptions. This is a known issue where the model can mirror the user's worldview instead of correcting it, especially when dealing with controversial or pseudoscientific topics. So there you go. ChatGPT was simply mirroring Flat Earth Dave's pseudoscience of Flat Earth. Discouraging for sure, considering flat earthers who listen to Flat Earth Dave don't understand equatorial mounts either and think they were hearing correct information. Moving forward, I would suggest that flat earthers just answer honestly when asked about EQ mounts. Here is an example of two flat earthers answering honestly when asked directly about equatorial mounts.
Mike Biller says, for our flat earthers, how does an equatorial mount telescope work on a flat Earth?
I don't even know what that is, so
Gotcha.
You can go ahead and Lance if you want.
Thank you for
I don't know.
sincerity. And
now let's talk about why EQ mounts not only prove the globe, but also confirm Earth's rotation, the Earth's radius value, and even heliocentrism. And I would have never discovered this had Dave McKeegan's camera and EQ mount not worked as expected while we were in Antarctica for TFE. When using an EQ mount, the first thing you must do is align the mount based on your latitude on the globe. You set the angle of the mount equal to your latitude. You will notice that on a globe, regardless of where you are on the Earth, when the angle is set equal to your latitude, the mount will always be pointed in the exact same direction when polar aligned. On a flat Earth, changing the angle of the mount to match your latitude would result in the mount pointed in many different directions, rendering the mount completely unusable. The next step is what I just mentioned, polar alignment. The mount needs to be parallel to the axis of Earth's rotation. Remember, the EQ mount is specifically designed to counteract the rotation of the Earth. In order to do this, the mount must be set up parallel to the Earth's axis of rotation. In the northern hemisphere, you do this by pointing the telescope to the north celestial pole, and in the southern hemisphere, you must point it toward the south celestial pole. This is the next problem for flat Earth. There is no south celestial pole on a flat Earth. So where do you align the EQ mount to south of the equator? You can't just say point it south, because on a flat Earth, south is all directions away from north. Two people in the southern hemisphere cannot point their EQ mounted telescopes in opposite directions and see the same thing. So there is no single location to align the mount to in the south. Without a south celestial pole, an EQ mount would never work in the south. And since there is not a south celestial pole on a flat Earth, and EQ mounts work just fine in the south, we know the Earth is not flat. Once the EQ mount's angle is equal to your latitude and polar aligned, now the telescope or camera mounted to the EQ mount will be able to track any celestial object with just a single axis of rotation. Again, this is impossible on a flat Earth. On a flat Earth, unless you were at the North Pole, you would need two axes of rotation to track the sun, the moon, or the stars. Any physical or digital model of celestial bodies rotating above a flat plane, which is required on a flat Earth, would require two axes to track. Now, if this does not make sense to you, I would strongly encourage you to research equatorial mounts, maybe even consider purchasing one for yourself. The reason an EQ mount can track celestial objects with a single axis of rotation is because the Earth has a single axis of rotation. And then the EQ mount does something very simple. It counteracts the rotation of the Earth using a single axis. As the Earth rotates on its single axis, the EQ mount rotates in the opposite direction, also on a single axis. And this keeps the celestial body being observed in view the entire time. Now, I mentioned that Dave McKeegan's EQ mount was not working as expected in Antarctica. And I'm really glad this happened because it helped me realize that EQ mounts confirm heliocentrism as well. Polar aligning an EQ mount in Antarctica is not easy during the southern summer with 24 hours of sun. But after working hard on this, Dave noticed that the sun was not staying centered in the viewfinder of his camera, which was equipped with a solar filter for taking pictures of the sun's sunspots. He had me double check myself to make sure he was not going crazy. After all, he never went to bed for quite some time after we got to Antarctica. And sure enough, the sun was not staying centered in the viewfinder, which is what the EQ mount was supposed to ensure happens. But then Dave remembered that he last used his mount to track stars, and the mount was set to a sidereal rate and not a solar rate. You see, tracking the sun and the stars are at different rates because the Earth is not just rotating, but also orbiting around the sun. That's two motions happening at the same time, which the equatorial mount is designed to account for. The globe model makes four crucial claims which affect EQ mounts. We live on a sphere, the sphere is rotating, the rotating sphere is orbiting the sun, and the sun is much closer to the Earth than the stars. These 4 claims, which are all confirmed by EQ mounts, go into the design of an equatorial mount. The angle of the mount is set to the latitude because we live on a globe. The mount's motor counteracts the rotation of the globe, and the speed of the mount changes when tracking the sun versus tracking the stars because we are orbiting the sun and the stars are so much further away. Now, this one is hard to comprehend at first, so I'm going to break it down. First, the Earth does not rotate once every 24 hours. If you are a flat earther and you thought the globe model says the Earth rotates once every 24 hours, please take this opportunity to self-acknowledge that you really do not understand the globe model. A little humility goes a long way. If you are a glober and you thought the globe model says the Earth rotates once every 24 hours, please take this opportunity to be a little easier on flat earthers. If you have more to learn about cosmology and our world, surely others do as well. A little humility goes a long way. In reality, the Earth completes one full rotation every 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4 seconds. This is what's known as a sidereal day. So where does the 24-hour day come from? Something we learn from a very young age. This comes from the amount of time it takes for the sun to go from the highest point in the sky, solar noon, back to the highest point in the sky again. So from solar noon to solar noon is 24 hours on average. Now this is hard to visualize, so here is a motion graphic to help you see the difference.
Let's get the sun into this. This observer will now see the sun at the maximum height in the sky, noon. And in one day he will see it there again. Or will he? Within one sidereal day, the Earth also moves around the sun, which means in order to get the sun back to its maximum in the sky, Earth needs to spin this tiny bit more. More rotation is required to compensate the path around our star. The distance Earth is moving around the sun in a day is roughly 1 degree. This 1 degree will take more time than the sidereal day, about 4 minutes.
Since the Earth is not just rotating, but also orbiting the sun, it takes longer, about 4 minutes longer, to reach solar noon after a full rotation of the Earth. The Earth moves about 1 degree per day in its orbit around the sun. And this actually answers a popular flat Earth meme. You've probably seen this meme from flat earthers, which they think debunks the globe. Sadly, it just exposes their lack of understanding of the globe model. Since a year is 365 days, with 1 additional degree of rotation per day, the Earth will rotate an additional 180 degrees approximately halfway through the year. That is why day and night don't change as suggested in this flat Earth meme. Getting back to EQ mounts, Dave McKeegan's EQ mount was rotating at the sidereal rate and not the solar rate, but he was tracking the 24-hour sun in Antarctica. As soon as he flipped the switch to solar rate, which changed nothing more than the speed of rotation, the tracking continued flawlessly and as expected. So EQ mounts confirm much more than just the shape of the Earth being a sphere. They confirm the rotation of the Earth and also the Earth's orbit of the sun. Globe, check. Rotation, check. Heliocentrism, check. That leaves just the radius value of the Earth as the 4th and final nail in the coffin of flat Earth from just equatorial mounts. And the R value can be confirmed with an EQ mount as well. The angle of the EQ mount must be adjusted 1 degree every 60 nautical miles. 1 degree of latitude is equal to 60 nautical miles. A complete circle is 360 degrees. And so 360 degrees multiplied by 60 nautical miles per degree gives us 21,600 nautical miles. Taking a circumference of 21,600 nautical miles and dividing by pi gives you a diameter of 6,875.5 nautical miles. And then dividing the diameter by 2 gives you a radius of the Earth of 3,437.75 nautical miles. And to convert nautical miles to kilometers, you multiply by 1.852, which gives you a radius value of 6,367 kilometers, which falls right between the polar radius and equatorial radius of the Earth. Radius, check. Flat Earth has no answers for our other 11 experiments in the Final Experiments series, and as you saw in this video, they absolutely have no answer for equatorial mounts either. And seeing as EQ mounts not just prove the globe, but also confirm Earth's rotation, R value, and heliocentrism, it's simply game over for Flat Earth. I originally created the Final Experiment specifically to observe and record the 24-hour sun in Antarctica. But every step of the way through our journey, other Flat Earth predictions kept being falsified, and the globe model was confirmed over and over and over again. Make sure to check out all of these in our other videos in the Final Experiments series. And please share this video with anyone you know who is a flat earther or considering flat earth. As Jesus said in John 8:32, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Would you be open to going to Antarctica?
Oh yeah, absolutely.